Morning people, welcome back to F Politics. Today, Keir Starmer announced that his new deal with the EU would get rid of a lot of the trade barriers that Brexit created by the UK agreeing to follow the rules of the EU. Now, the right-wing press is screaming that this is a betrayal of the Brexit vote from 2016, among them, Good Morning Britain. And so when I went on the show this morning, I was thinking I was just going to be debating GMB Rees-Mogg's sister, Annunciata Rees-Mogg. But because both Susanna, Reid and Richard Madeley decided to back Brexit as well, it was 3-on-1. And it was obvious that this was going to be a biased debate right from the start, because look how they framed it.
The UK hosts its first EU summit since Brexit today, as the Prime Minister attempts to reset relations, paving the way for a wider agreement with Brussels. Now, Sir Keir Starmer says that today's expected deal with the European Union would be a win for jobs and bills and borders.
But many, including several of today's papers, as you can see, think it's a betrayal of the Brexit vote and a step closer to the UK joining the EU.
So it's just Keir Starmer saying that having a closer relationship with the EU would help with the cost of living, whereas it's many people saying that having a closer relationship is such a betrayal of democracy. Again, framing Brexit as the voice of the people, whereas anybody that challenges Brexit must be the political elite. And Susanna continues that when she introduces me, even implying that a vote to leave the EU as a whole 10 years ago somehow means that people now want an extremely distant relationship from the EU.
Femi, the country voted to leave the EU. How on earth is this government going to take us back in?
So, we can debate another time whether or not it was democratic to have a referendum on our relationship with the EU before people could actually see what that relationship would be. And then once the Brexit deal was negotiated and everybody, including Brexit supporters, hated it, refusing to let people vote on it.
That's not true.
But you will lose that debate.
That's not true.
But
just blatant misinformation, because within 6 months of Boris Johnson signing his Brexit deal, he was on the national media saying that his Brexit deal was unfair and needed to be fixed. The DUP, the party in Northern Ireland that supports Brexit, was rejecting that Brexit deal before we'd even left. And the Reform Party was literally saying that leaving the EU on Boris Johnson's deal was worse than remaining in the EU.
You know, I see the withdrawal agreement as much worse than remain, frankly.
So when Mogg says...
That's not true.
But that's just a lie.
And you lost the vote, Femi, back in 2016.
Yeah.
And now it looks like the government is going to take us into a closer alliance with the organisation we came out of.
Again, implying that a vote from 10 years ago to not be part of the EU somehow means we're not allowed to have a close relationship with the EU now in 2025.
let me be absolutely clear. I do not care about betraying a Brexit vote from 10 years ago.
You don't care about democracy.
You know why?
Now, I know I didn't properly address the "you don't care about democracy" accusation, and I had plans to talk about the fact that we have had 3 elections since the referendum in 2016, because that's how democracy works. You vote, people see how it goes, and then they vote again. In fact, it's kind of the definition of a dictatorship that you vote for something, then the person who's in charge then says, all right, no more voting. And that's the narrative that they've been pushing around Brexit, even though Brexit hadn't been negotiated in 2016. People don't like it now, but they think we're not allowed to change our mind. But I couldn't say any of that, because I've been doing this for a while, and I know that if you're in hostile territory and you know you're not going to get a fair shake, you have to just stick to one single point and prosecute that to the fullest. And that point was this.
Because I care a hell of a lot more about the record levels of people that are currently in poverty than I care about the wishes from 10 years ago of people, many of whom are dead.
Yeah, I know that point was provocative, but it's literally true. The under 65 population of the UK, on balance, voted to remain in the EU. So pretty much all the math that's been done on this topic says that by about 2019, because of old people dying faster, we have been a Remain voting population for a long time.
Right now, people are in poverty. The UK is facing a record cost of living crisis, and I care a lot more about that. I mean, the debate about whether or not Brexit is good or bad for working people, whether or not it's making us richer or poorer, that's over, because your lot have said it is making us poorer. Boris Johnson said it's that.
Well, let's let Annunciata say what she thinks.
That's quite simply not true. The only extent to which anyone is able to argue as making us poorer is by absolutely inaccurate Office of Budget Responsibility forecast.
Again, that is just not true. It is not just the OBR that is the only thing saying that Brexit has made us poorer. You've got the British Chamber of Commerce that has surveyed British businesses that export to the EU, and 60% of them say that Brexit has made their lives harder. Pretty much every section of the UK economy has said that Brexit has damaged them. The National Federation of Fishermen's Associations, the Bank of England, the Food and Drink Association, the car industry, the manufacturing industry, the British Medical Association, the Small Business Federation? Like, I'm just sat here on the grass having done no research and I came up with those 7 off the top of the dome. So she was telling a blatant lie about the state of our economy and she was just allowed to keep going. And so I felt that I should mention that to the hosts.
It is not a saving. Aligning us with the EU would cost us more.
She then goes on for a bit, and then Richard Madeley implies again that being closer to the EU is some kind of democratic betrayal.
Do you think that it's a sneaky attempt to get back into Europe?
Absolutely.
OK, Femi.
A two-faced thing.
I'm just really worried because right now there's somebody on your programme who supported one of the most economically damaging policies in UK history. In fact, she even supported no-deal Brexit, saying it would save £80 billion a year. I mean, we can all see the damage Brexit has already done, and they're giving economic advice on national television.
I
just want you to know that that's happening on your show.
OK, but you've got to respect Annunciata's opinion.
On economics?
And she speaks
on economics?
for many...
She said no-deal Brexit would save us £80 billion a year. There is no major economy on the planet...
I just want to point out, that the majority so far of the viewers who have got in touch with us agree with Annunciata. So, Femi, you can keep saying my name, but I need to make the point.
Look, I'm there explaining that Good Morning Britain has invited somebody onto their show to give economic advice, somebody who has supported doing something that every successful economy on the planet has chosen specifically not to do, arguing that it would save us £80 billion a year, which is almost as much as most economists say Brexit has cost us. And for some reason, Good Morning Britain doesn't seem to want to let me point out to their audience that they are facilitating misinformation. Funny that.
That Annunciata is making a view heard, or trying to, which a lot of people who voted for Brexit agree with.
By 45
and the people who have got in touch with us this morning have not died. They are still living voters.
Yeah, Suze, that's not how statistics works, because if I point out that Leave voters have died disproportionately faster than Remain voters because their demographic was much older, that point doesn't get disproven by saying, hey, look at this Leave voter, he's still alive. I mean, you can call me insensitive for pointing out that the Brexit majority literally died years ago, and then we can have a debate about what's more important, your hurt feelings or the poverty that Brexit has inflicted on millions of people. But let's not try and argue against maths, eh?
Who feel that their democratic decision is now being overturned.
By 45 to 9, Brexit voters believe that Brexit has made us poorer. As for no-deal Brexit, which was supported by you, there is no major economy on the planet that has no trade deal with its closest neighbours, which means she supported doing something that every successful economy on the planet...
You don't need to talk about Annunciata in the third person,
which means
she's right.
Now, not only is that tone policing, but when I watched the whole thing back, it really pissed me off, because Susanna is complaining that I'm addressing her, the host, not Mogg directly. But that's the whole problem with the debate. It was 3-on-1. They were forcing me to address all 3 of them at the same time, and then complaining that I wasn't just addressing one of them. Worse still, after letting Mogg give another speech, they ask me a question, which I ignore, choosing instead to focus on addressing the misinformation that Mogg was giving about the damage of Brexit to the economy. And then they complain that I'm not answering their questions.
Do you think that the Prime Minister is sneakily trying to get us back into the EU by the back door?
I would say that right now, every single party that supported Brexit says that Brexit is making us poor. The Reform Party has said that Brexit is making us poor. Nigel Farage says we haven't...
You've made that point so many times.
But you challenged it, so I'm pushing back.
Nigel has absolutely clarified that.
Please?
Well, I'd rather you answer my question. Femi, do you think that the Prime Minister today is attempting to get back into the EU by the back door?
Rishi Sunak says Brexit has damaged our export.
Oh, and let me just add, do you know why I had no issue at all completely ignoring Richard Madeley's question about whether or not following the rules of the EU was somehow the same as rejoining the EU by the back door? It's because Richard Madeley has a track record of debating Brexit with me on Good Morning Britain without even knowing what Brexit is.
The deal takes us out of the EU. Let's be really clear on that.
But a lot of people who want to leave don't like that deal. They don't think that it does take us out of the EU because it keeps us in the customs union.
It literally does.
No, but it doesn't because it keeps us in the customs union.
Sorry, the customs union is not the European Union. As I just explained, that deal takes us out of the EU. It fulfills the referendum mandate.
But a lot of people don't think that it does. That's why it won't pass Parliament.
Sorry, the customs union is not the European Union. Let's be clear on that.
You think that it takes us out of the EU, but the majority of people who want to leave don't agree with you. That's the maths.
If it does it, is it a good deal? No, I'd agree it's a bad deal. But does it take us out of the EU? 100%.
Well, a lot of people say it's not 100%. You're just saying it doesn't make it so.
No. Law says it makes it so. As in, I literally studied EU law. We would be out of the European Union.
Go and tell that to somebody who wants to leave.
It is literally an exit deal.
He was arguing that because many people believed that Theresa May's Brexit deal wasn't Brexit, that meant that it objectively wasn't Brexit. And now both Richard Madeley and Susanna Reid are arguing that not following any EU rules and leaving the single market was all somehow on the ballot paper in 2016. So Richard Madeley, Susanna Reid and Annunciata Rees-Mogg were all just a cabal of misinformation today.
Susanna says Brexit has damaged our exports. Boris Johnson says it's damaged our trade. The Reform Party says that it's making us poor, and that if they were in power, they'd go for a no-deal Brexit, which the Reform Party themselves say would damage our food supply for the next 20 years.
Is there any chance you could possibly answer the question? Do you think that tactically what we're seeing today is an attempt to get back into the EU by the back door?
Given that the majority of people would like to be back in the EU, yes, I would like to move in that direction. Ultimately, this is making us poor. And anybody watching this cares a hell of a lot more about the cost of living crisis than the political squabbles in Westminster.
Yeah.
See, there'll be people who watch that thinking, oh my God, Femi was so rude and shouty during that. It was 3-on-1. Like, there's an important phrase here, moderated debate. Because if the hosts are there to moderate the debate, then it is their job to make sure that each side of the debate has an equal amount of airtime. In which case, if the three of them are pro-Brexit, then I should logically have more airtime. But if they're not there to moderate the debate, then they are simply participants in the debate, in which case I have every right to stand up for myself. Because the question is, am I willing to be part of a national broadcast where 3/4 of the airtime is supporting Brexit? A policy which almost every economist on the board says is pushing millions of people deeper into poverty. The answer is fuck no. Make sure you watch my documentary about what Labour needs to do, not just on Brexit, but on all of its policies. I'm Femi. Make sure you follow F Politics. If politics doesn't F you, have a great week.